In the summer of 1854, in the stifling heat of a Louisiana parish, a wedding took place that left even the cruelest men speechless. A plantation owner stood at the altar, and beside him, his enslaved cook, a woman mocked for her size. But what followed was no love story. It was a wager, a humiliation, and some say the beginning of a curse that would consume not just a single family, but an entire town. The story begins with Charles R. Whitfield, a planter whose family had long controlled a stretch of sugarcane fields carved from swamp. The Whitfields were infamous for their cruelty, wealth, and obsession with spectacle. When Charles, the youngest son, gambled away his inheritance in a drunken card game, he was dared by his peers to marry someone unthinkable, Martha, the plantation's overweight cook. She was known not only for her cooking but also for her silence. She rarely spoke unless spoken to, and some claimed her voice was not entirely her own, but borrowed, something hidden. Witnesses said that on the night of the wedding, the church lanterns flickered in strange ways, as if the air itself resisted. The pastor, an elderly man named Reverend Alcott, later recorded in his diary that when Martha lifted her veil, the congregation swore they smelled smoke, even though no candles burned nearby. The marriage was intended as humiliation, a grotesque joke played on a woman stripped of dignity. But soon whispers began. Children claimed that Martha's laughter carried voices that were not hers. Slaves in the quarters spoke of strange knocks in the cookhouse, of food that spoiled overnight, and of shadows that lingered too long on the walls. Within weeks, the Whitfield family began disappearing. After the wedding, Charles brought Martha into the Whitfield mansion, a house already carrying whispered curses. Built on the remains of a failed Jesuit mission, the mansion was known locally as a hollow house because its corridors carried sound in unnatural ways. Footsteps echoed long after their owners had stopped walking, and mirrors had long since been removed, smashed decades earlier after guests claimed the reflections did not match the movements of the living. The fragments were buried beneath the sugarcane rows, remembered only by the oldest women in the quarters who warned children never to dig too deep. Martha was placed in the east wing, the part of the mansion where the walls peeled with damp, where no servant wished to linger after nightfall. Her laughter echoed through the halls, not innocent, but layered as if many people laughed at once. When Charles confronted her, demanding silence, she reportedly whispered, "This house remembers more than you think." The slaves began to avoid her. The overseer, a cruel man named Candler, claimed that livestock grew sick if they ate food she prepared. Dogs would not approach her. Still, Charles, bound by his wager and mocked by peers, kept her in the house. Within a month, Charles's older brother vanished. His boots were found outside Martha's room, but his body was never recovered. His wife said she saw him fold into the wall as if the plaster itself had swallowed him. The Whitfields hushed the matter, telling the town he had left for New Orleans. But Reverend Alcott wrote in his diary a line never meant to be read. She brought no veil to this marriage. She brought a mouth of many voices. The cookhouse, once a place of comfort where enslaved people gathered to share warmth, food, prayers, and whispered hopes, grew silent when Martha moved into the big house. Fires refused to stay lit, pots cracked inexplicably, and voices were heard where no one stood. A slave named Josiah recalled that if you leaned near the cookhouse door, you could hear people praying in languages not spoken for centuries. Sometimes a prayer would stop mid-sentence, followed by the sound of chewing. Charles ordered the cookhouse locked after servants refused to enter. Yet on nights when the swamp wind rustled the cane fields, the locked doors would rattle as though something inside demanded feeding. A white neighbor, curious and cruel, tried to break in one evening to prove nothing was amiss. He never returned. Only his hat was found, bent in half and smeared with grease. The cookhouse became a forbidden place. ignored by the Whitfields, but never forgotten. Children whispered that Martha did not cook food, but something else, something meant not for the living, but for the house itself. Years later, during the Civil War, a Federal captain wrote in his field notes of a strange oven marked by symbols not of Christian origin. His men refused to eat bread baked there, claiming the dough itself seemed to breathe. Even after freedom was declared, former slaves spoke of Martha's cookhouse with one warning: it never cooled. Candler, the overseer, prided himself on cruelty. He mocked Martha's size, called her a pig, and once spat into her stew to assert dominance. 3 nights later, he vanished. His quarters were found in disarray, walls streaked with a dark film smelling of lard. His whip was discovered in the sugarcane rows, but his body never appeared. Slaves claimed to hear his screams long after he was gone, echoing through the cane like broken glass in the wind. Charles dismissed it as drunken misadventure, but Reverend Alcott wrote, "The overseer's absence silenced one lash, but a new lash, uncounted, took its place. Fear spread. Workers refused to enter the fields after dark. Cane stalks were found bent into strange symbols, some resembling twisted human shapes. At night, shadows moved across ceilings as if defying gravity. One field hand, cornered by Charles's fury, finally admitted what others feared to speak. She feeds the house, and the house eats. By winter, Charles grew uneasy. He summoned a priest from New Orleans to bless the home. The man stayed one night and left before dawn without taking his pay. His final words to Charles were, "This place was never yours. It was built for hungers you cannot satisfy." After that, Charles avoided the east wing, drank heavily, and paced the halls at night with a pistol in hand. Martha never flinched. She only laughed, her voice splitting into echoes that crawled through the floorboards. By 1856, rumors spread that Martha was pregnant. Townsfolk whispered in disgust, mocking Charles, calling the marriage a stain on white society. Inside the house, the whispers darkened. Martha's belly rose and fell unnaturally, like waves under cloth. Midwives forced in to attend her refused to touch her, swearing they felt many small hands pressing beneath her skin. When the time came, no infant cried. Instead, those in the quarters reported a deep, wet exhale that shook windows. Charles locked the doors for 3 days. When he emerged, his hair had turned gray at the temples, and he never spoke of what was born. Some claimed a bundle was buried beneath the sugarcane rows, marked only by a circle of broken glass. Others swore they glimpsed a small figure darting through the halls at night, never fully seen, but always accompanied by a dragging sound. The slaves avoided the house completely, saying the laughter now came not just from Martha, but from something smaller, clicking and gurgling like boiling fat. The town grew uneasy. The Whitfields, once untouchable, became objects of fear and pity. Children dared each other to run past the plantation gates, claiming that if you listened closely, you could hear an infant crying, ending always in a man's laughter. Reverend Alcott, weakened by illness, confessed his final sermon before fleeing the parish. No wedding united them, no birth redeemed them. What they brought forth was not meant for any cradle. In 1860, a fire consumed the parish orphanage, killing 40 children. Their screams carried across the cane fields as the night sky glowed red. The fire was declared accidental, but townsfolk whispered it was Martha's doing. Witnesses claimed they saw her at the plantation gates, calm as embers lit her face. One survivor, a girl named Ruth, said she saw Martha inside the orphanage hours before the fire, standing at the foot of every bed, humming. Strangely, none of the children's bodies were recovered. The fire left only ashes, nails, and melted frames. The smell of pork lingered for weeks, making passers-by gag. The parish blamed Charles for negligence, but he swore innocence, pleading with the sheriff that his wife kept ovens where no oven should be. That same week, children in town woke screaming, insisting a woman stood in the corner of their rooms. Parents swore no one was there, yet the children described her the same way. Large, silent, and smiling with far too many teeth. Parish records from that year recorded over a dozen children disappearing. Most were labeled as runaways, but private letters from townsfolk told a different story. Strange knocking came from empty walls, meals left on tables, spoiled within minutes. After the fire, the townspeople refused to meet Martha's gaze. They whispered that the Whitfield plantation had become a kind of orphanage, not for the living but for something else entirely. When the Civil War erupted, Union troops swept through Louisiana, burning plantations and freeing slaves. But when they arrived at the Whitfield estate, they hesitated. Soldiers reported hearing cries from the fields, though no one was there. Horses refused to pass through the gates. A stubborn colonel ordered his men inside. Only 3 returned. They spoke of corridors twisting into dead ends, walls that bled a sugar-like syrup, and a woman laughing in every room. The Whitfield house itself remained untouched. Soldiers attempted to set it on fire twice, but the flames died before reaching the roof. One officer wrote bitterly that the house itself resisted the fire. It was not mere wood, but something older, wearing a skin like ours. Charles, now frail and paranoid, begged the soldiers to remove Martha. They refused, claiming she did not appear restrained. She moved freely through the halls, smiling in a way that made even armed men retreat. After the war, the plantation fell into decay. The cane fields rotted, the overseer's quarters collapsed, and the Whitfields went bankrupt. Yet Martha remained. Freed slaves refused to return, warning others never to step foot on the land. Former children of the orphanage, now adults and broken, swore they could hear whispers calling them back at night. Some went back. None were ever seen again. The parish remained silent. History seemed to erase the Whitfields from memory, but silence was never safety. In the following years, silence itself became a warning. Reverend Alcott fled the parish during the war, leaving his church behind. He died in 1872, but his belongings were sent back to Louisiana for cataloging. Among them was his diary. Townsfolk expected sermons, confessions, scripture. Instead, they found frantic notes about the Whitfields. He described Martha as a vessel, a table set for unclean guests, and the mouth that opened the house. In one passage he wrote, "She is not fat, she is full, and what fills her is not for us." The diary spread fear. Families burned their copies of the Whitfield ledgers, afraid to be linked to the cursed land. The church tried to suppress it, but secret copies circulated. One line terrified readers most. "She does not cook for us. She cooks for the walls, and the walls are never satisfied." By 1880, the parish had lost nearly half its population to migration. Those who stayed kept their children inside after dark, praying each night with doors locked. They whispered that if one stared at the Whitfield house too long, lanterns would glow in the windows, though no one had lived there for years. Yet records showed someone remained. Flour, pork fat, and salt continued to be paid for in cash into the 1890s, signed only with the initial M. The diary became a cursed object. Those who read it reported dreams of being cooked alive, roasted by unseen hands. One farmer tore at his own flesh, screaming, "I'm done, I'm done," as if he were meat on a spit. The church locked the diary away, but the Whitfield house waited, patient. By the 1890s, the plantations were ruined. Children still dared each other to play near the iron gates. They said that if they pressed their ears to the bars, they could hear Martha singing lullabies, her voice too sweet to be human. One group of boys disappeared in 1894. Only their shoes were found, arranged neatly in a circle by the gate. Their mother swore she heard chewing in the night, wet, grinding sounds from the chimneys. One woman claimed to find teeth in her fireplace, teeth too small to belong to adults. The sheriff refused to investigate, claiming the land was cursed. Yet more children vanished. Each time, their shoes returned. Locals began to avoid the road entirely. Travelers reported knocks on their carriage doors at night, but no one was there. Some swore a large woman walked beside them, matching their pace, whispering promises of warm meals and safe beds. Those who accepted never returned. A newspaper ran a headline in 1897, "Parish Children Vanish. Is the Whitfield place to blame?" The article was suppressed within days. That same week, the editor's office burned, destroying every copy. By the end of the century, the Whitfield plantation had become folklore, a ghost story told to scare children. But locals knew the truth. They claimed the laughter still carried on humid nights across the cane fields, sounding like more than one voice. In 1901, the Whitfield estate was sold. Charles had long been dead, found shriveled in his bed, mouth stretched as if screaming. Martha had not been seen in years, though whispers suggested she still roamed the halls. The buyer, a banker from New Orleans, brought a crew of hardened men, unafraid of superstition, to strip the land for lumber. They lasted a week. Men complained of voices in the rafters, laughter from walls, food turning sour before they could eat it. One swore a woman fed him stew, but when he woke, his mouth was full of ashes. The banker arrived to inspect the work. The men had vanished. Tools were abandoned. Smoke lingered in the air. On the dining room table, bowls were set, each filled with teeth. The banker fled, returning the deed to the parish, never to return. The house remained untouched, windows boarded, gates locked. Attempts to demolish it failed. Crews refused. Others claimed the land could not be bought. Deeds turned to ash when signed. Townspeople noticed bread rising too fast, meat spoiling overnight, children waking hungry no matter how much they ate. The elders whispered the Whitfield cook was feeding again. By 1910, sleep itself became scarce in the parish. Families awoke nightly at 3:17 a.m., the smell of roasting meat thick in their rooms. Doctors called it hysteria, priests called it temptation, but mothers swore their children wandered the halls, eyes closed, mouths open as if chewing in dreams. One boy was found barefoot, walking toward the Whitfield gates. When shaken awake, he screamed, "She's waiting at the table." The parish fell into decline. Crops rotted, businesses closed, people starved despite abundant food. A doctor from Baton Rouge arrived to investigate. He stayed 3 nights, recording strange events. Food molding instantly, clocks stopping at 3:17, footsteps pacing his room despite locked doors. On the 4th night, he disappeared. His journal ended with a single unfinished line. "She is cooking me now." No outsider came willingly after that. Families fled or vanished. Homes were left empty, meals half-eaten, fires still warm. The sheriff blamed bandits, but the old women shook their heads. By 1912, Sheriff Dugan was the last authority. Proud, he dismissed all talk of curses, calling it superstition and gossip. To prove it, he hosted a dinner in the Whitfield house, inviting townsfolk, priests, and deputies. Dust coated the table, yet when the lanterns were lit, platters of roasted meat, bowls of buttered corn, steaming bread appeared. The guests were horrified. The sheriff laughed, carved a slice of roast for himself, and forced others to eat. Hours later, screams echoed. By dawn, only scraps of flesh remained, scattered like scraps of linen. No one entered the house again. Gates were locked. The name Whitfield was erased from parish records. Yet each year on the same date, townsfolk swore they smelled a feast roasting on the night wind. In 1921, outsiders reopened the mansion, not as a home, but as a boarding school for troubled girls. Northern investors dismissed local warnings as superstition. Beds were installed in the east wing, desks in the halls, and a chapel in the old dining room. At first, the school seemed ordinary, but the girls began to change. They ate endlessly, yet grew thin. At night, they sang in their sleep, voices blending into strange sounds that carried through the cane. Teachers reported pots of stew cooking themselves in the kitchens, though no one was present. The headmistress tried to maintain order, but within months, her staff vanished one by. The girls would only say they were taking supper. One visiting inspector left after a week, insisting he saw the girls' shadows moving differently from their bodies. He swore one shadow laughed while its owner wept. The school closed suddenly in 1923. Parents received no explanation. Their daughters returned silent, refusing any food not served on Peter plates. Many never married, never bore children. Some vanished entirely. When asked, they whispered only one word: cookhouse. By the late 1920s, the curse had spread beyond the Whitfield estate. Hunger moved through the parish like a disease. Families ate yet wasted away. Livestock starved even when feed was plenty. Babies cried all night, their bellies swollen but empty. Doctors sent medicine, yet nothing helped. Priests fasted, but the hunger grew. The oldest freed slaves warned townsfolk, "She has left the house. She walks now." And indeed, Martha returned. A large woman in black, carrying an iron pot, appeared at crossroads offering food to travelers. Some accepted, none returned. By 1930, whole neighborhoods were abandoned. The parish had shrunk to a shadow of itself. Survivors kept bread locked away, wrapped in scripture. They taught their children never to eat at strangers' tables, never to take stew from anyone whose face was hidden. Yet the hunger persisted. One of the few surviving students of the Whitfield School, a girl named Agnes, became a nun. In 1934, she told her story to a visiting priest. She said Martha came to the dormitories each night, sitting at the foot of their beds, humming. At first, the girls were not afraid. She smelled of butter and sugar, warmth and comfort. But soon the smell turned foul. Her breath grew sour, her humming deepened, layered with other voices. Agnes swore she once saw Martha lift her gown to reveal not flesh, but dozens of mouths, gasping, chewing, whispering. The priest dismissed the story as hysteria, but Agnes disappeared soon after, leaving only her rosary coiled in a bowl of lard. Her convent burned a year later. The surviving sisters said the flames smelled of roasted pork. The Great Depression hit Louisiana hard, but the parish suffered worse than anywhere else. Families starved despite government rations. Relief workers sent trucks of food, yet by the time it arrived, it had spoiled. Reporters came, curious about the mystery. Few returned. Those who did spoke of strange women serving meals in their dreams, only to wake with mouths full of ash. One reporter published a single article before hanging himself. His words read, "The cookhouse never went cold. It never will." That year, abandoned houses outnumbered the living. Parish maps stopped being updated. Officials removed it from census records, yet the Whitfield mansion remained. Travelers at night swore its windows glowed with lantern light, and the smell of meat drifted on the wind for miles. By 1940, only one family remained near the Whitfield property. The Dyers, poor sharecroppers with nowhere else to go, claimed the curse was superstition, exaggeration meant to scare outsiders. For a time they survived, growing corn, raising pigs, living quietly. Then, one by one, the pigs disappeared. The corn rotted on the stalk. Their youngest daughter began waking at night, speaking in voices not her own. Neighbors swore they heard laughter from the dark house, echoing too loud for a single family. One night, the house went silent. When neighbors finally entered, they found a table set for 6. Each plate was full, each chair empty, the food still warm. The Dyers were never seen again. After the Dyers, authorities finally acted. In 1943, county officials arrived with chains, nails, and holy water. They boarded up the Whitfield mansion, sealing every door and window. A priest walked the property, chanting prayers. But the boards warped overnight, nails bending outward as if pushed from inside. The priest was found, days later, drowned in a vat of grease in the rectory. Officials declared the work complete. They marked the property condemned. Locals whispered that at night, lanterns still glowed through the cracks, as if a feast went on behind the boards. The house remained sealed, but never silent. On humid nights, laughter drifted across the fields. By the late 1940s, the parish had nearly disappeared. Maps no longer named it. Families avoided speaking of it. The government claimed the land had been reclaimed by the swamp, yet truck drivers passing through told different stories. They swore they saw a figure standing by the road at night offering food, a large, silent woman carrying an iron pot. Some men accepted. They never returned. The Whitfield name was erased from records. The church denied Reverend Alcott had ever existed. Yet old diaries and letters surfaced, repeating the same story. A marriage that should never have happened, a cookhouse that never went cold, and a hunger that spread like rot. The parish was not gone. It had been swallowed. Today, the Whitfield plantation no longer appears on maps. The parish exists only as a ghost, erased from census and history alike. Yet truckers still whisper, hikers still vanish. Occasionally, a traveler returns raving about a warm meal, a welcoming smile, and laughter that never ends. What began as a cruel bed in 1854 became far worse. A ritual, a covenant between a woman mocked for her body and a house built to consume. Whether Martha was victim or vessel, no one can say. But the record is clear. Once she entered the Whitfield home, nothing left it unchanged. They called it a marriage, but it was a feeding. And it never ended. Even now, if you drive the back roads of Louisiana, keep your windows shut. If you smell roasting meat where no kitchen stands, do not follow it. And if a woman offers you food on a dark road, do not take it. The cookhouse never went cold, and it never will.